Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning and welcome back to Faith in Our Hometown, our weekly discussion as people of faith in the greater Joplin area about issues that matter to us. One of the issues that has touched our area recently is one of the issues that is going on all around our country, and that is the disturbing issue of teen suicide. Why does it happen? What can we do about it? How can we talk about it in such a way that we make an improvement in our country? Because Joplin, of course, is no more immune to this than any other area. We'd like to think we're kind of protected in our own little spot here, but we're really not. And so because it has touched our area and it's touched so many lives of people around the area, we wanted to start bringing a bit of that discussion so that we can maybe make a little bit of a difference in the lives of our young people and in our lives as a community. We don't want our young people vulnerable. We want to do what we can to help them, to reach out and to help them to make good choices in their lives as opposed to making a poor choice like that. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute, and we're going to be talking about the issue of teen suicide. So stick around and join us right after this break.
Once I quit playing football, I still kept up with the eating, the amount of calories I wasn't exercising, so the weight started adding on. Dr. Lou is very knowledgeable in the work he does. He also has a program set up that has support systems in place for you. You'll go through the seminar at first. He'll give you the different examples of surgeries you can have to see which one works best with you. He will also sit down with you and discuss the options, what he feels, but he'll work with you the entire time. Mercy has their gastric bypass program here. They have all kinds of resources and support systems in place. They want to see you succeed, and they're here to help you the entire time, even after the surgery.
Well, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. My guests this morning are Jen Black, who's the Executive Director of the Alliance of Southwest Missouri, and Brandon Eggleston, who is the Principal at Joplin High School. And so, Brandon and Jen, why don't you just introduce yourselves and say a little bit about yourselves before we get rolling here with our topic this morning.
Sure. As you said, my name is Jen Black, the Executive Director of the Alliance of Southwest Missouri. We do a lot of prevention work and safety, work specific to kids and their families. I've been in Joplin for about 25 years, and out of those 25 years, I've worked with teens for about 20 of them.
Great, yeah.
I'm Brandon Eggleston. I'm principal at the high school. I've been in this area all my life, so 43 years I've been in the Joplin area. I've worked for Joplin schools for 19 years, serving as a principal for the last 9. And the high school principal, this is my second year as a high school principal.
Yeah. Well, welcome to both of you. And again, this is not an issue that's just a problem for Joplin. We've got this problem nationwide, but we've come to care about it a little bit more right here in our own area because it's also affected us. We've had several suicides here in our own community by our teens in recent months. And so, when we start seeing about that and reading about it in the paper, it's just like, well, what can we do to make a bit of a difference? And that's the reason why we're asking you guys to be here this morning to help to talk to all of our viewers, because we got lots of grandmas and grandpas out there, moms and dads, and everybody, it's touched our lives. Most of them know a kid who knows one of the kids. And we just want to make sure that our kids have got an opening so that they've got somebody to talk to about some of these things that are happening in their lives. So what can we do, just in general? What can we do?
I think this is a perfect example of what's good, of what we can do, and open up the lines of communication and talking about the issue. It's not an easy subject to talk about.
It's extremely painful. Hard. Wow. And let me just say right now to any of the families out there whose lives have been touched by suicide, especially in these recent incidents here in our hometown. Just please know that you've been kept in prayer, and folks have been caring about what's going on. So we don't want to leave anybody out there, but I do think, even though it's painful to talk about, we do need to talk about it, because I don't want anybody else in the same situation. Enough families are hurting out there that we need to do what we can to talk about it enough that we can make a difference.
Right, because there's a ripple effect from a suicide, and how many people, it affects hundreds of people from one suicide, as far as who are suicide survivors, and so open up the lines of communication is and being just hitting the issue head on and knowing that trying to create that environment where it is okay to talk about mental illness, it is okay to talk about how you're feeling is one of the major things that we can do.
And Brandon, to you and all the folks in the school systems, whether it be in the public school system, whether it be in any of the private schools, our hats are off to you guys because you've got so many things, coming at you all the time. Like I've always said to some of the administrators over at the Joplin Public Schools and Carl Junction and Carthage, I'd say, in many other places in the country, our Catholic schools are like a refuge from the public schools. If you guys would do a lousier job at running your schools, they'd be beating down the door to get into ours. But that isn't happening, and good for the whole community. Okay, it's a great blessing for all of us that not only Joplin but all of our schools around the area are strong and doing well. But this is something that's landed in your laps. Yeah. And so, how are we going to reach kids and get their attention a little bit and show them that there are other options? How are we going to do some of that?
I think from a school aspect, there's just so many things that we can control. We're fortunate enough that we get to spend a lot of time with kids, and that's why we do the jobs we do, because we love kids and we want to be with them. So, making sure, I think on our end, is developing relationships with kids, and that's what our teachers focus on. That's what we focus on in the school system is developing a relationship and giving kids a positive person that they can come talk to and somebody they feel comfortable with talking to. And we do a lot of things at the high school to develop those relationships. Whether it's transitions classes where we're talking about, it's also the career ed side of it, but it's also those soft skills and how to develop assertiveness and how to have good communication and how to develop grit and being able to communicate effectively. And those are things that as teachers we really want to work on, and we want to have great relationships with kids and that be that person that they can come talk to. And that's one of the big things that we can do, and that's what kids need. Is they need relationships, and they need people that are going to listen to them.
Jen, how do we help do that? How do we help give all of our families out there and all the folks in the community those skills to do some of those things? How do we do some of that?
And I think that's key. I think it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to prevent situations like this. And so I think it's giving them opportunities to engage and meet teens, interact with teens, and that's uncomfortable for teens and for adults. But I prior to working with teens wasn't a huge fan myself, but quickly fell in love with them. And I think most adults would find that if they would kind of let the barrier down and engage with them.
Yeah. And again, sometimes it's the other relationships with the other adults in a kid's life.
Sure.
Because as I always tell my parents and my kids, it's just like, that's why we have a team helping take care of your kids, because they're not going to talk to you about some of this stuff, but they might talk to another trusted adult within that context.
Absolutely.
And that's why, I always laugh in our youth group settings, it's just like, they'll never talk to their own parents, but they'll talk to their parents' friends, right. Because those are trusted relationships. Those are relationships that they've come to trust.
Right.
And that's where we start finding out that the issues start popping and that the conversations really are happening, because it's almost by definition, I always just tell, parents and teenagers, well, it's kind of your job to fight with each other. I mean, it's okay. But it's really, we still got to give enough other avenues to make those connections and to talk about the things that they need to talk about. So how do we get them talking, and what do we do in terms of getting ourselves set up to listen well? How do we do some of that?
Sure. One of the ways at the Alliance specifically is we have a Safe Teens Coalition that meets on the third Thursday at noon every month, and they come together and we address topics that need to be addressed specifically to teens. And so we have the SAD group from Joplin High that attends, and some Fusion students from Joplin High. Carl Junction's looking at getting involved in bringing students as well. And so there would be some one-on-one interaction there, and then we would be able to come alongside those programs and support them to help them in creating an event where we could have adults and teens interacting and start building some relationships. Yeah. I think through Bright Futures, they've done a great job as far as doing lunch pals, and people can get plugged in that way and interacting with students at lunchtime and being a support. I know Young Life is also another great avenue for adults to get connected with teens and can volunteer there as well.
Yeah. And again, those just, I think so many times, even just saying to our teenagers over and over and over again, it's just like, all right, if something's going on, would you please just talk about it? If you don't want to talk with me about it, find somebody else that you trust, counselor, teacher, whoever, but talk about it. Don't just stay quiet.
Right.
Don't just, hide from the issues, whatever they happen to be. Let's hear about them. Let's deal with them. I mean, no, I may not like it, but what the heck? I'd still rather deal with it than, have them suffer by themselves.
Right.
And
I think that's key for adults to hear, no matter, we all have children in our lives, and it doesn't really matter how old they are. If there are signs of depression or withdrawing and, failing classes when that's not typical, lack of eating, when they start seeing signs like that, don't be afraid just to ask. Be very bold in your questions, and don't be afraid of the answer. And then don't try to be the hero and address it by yourself. It's time to reach out and get help if there's a true issue that surfaces.
Yeah.
So.
And I think there's a stigma with kids, right? And they truly believe that if they tell somebody, if they talk to somebody about what's going on, that they're going to end up institutionalized or they're going to end up in a hospital, which is not the case.
Oh, yeah.
It is not the case for 99.9% of students. There's opportunities to work through that. And I think on the parenting side, this brought a whole issue. I've got a 12, 11, and a 6-year-old, and I had a conversation with my 11 and my 12-year-old about suicide. Wasn't something I thought I would be broaching with them at this age, but felt that it was necessary to have this conversation with them and talk to them and let them know there is an avenue. So on the parent side of it, it's super hard for everybody to have that conversation, but it's a necessary conversation that we need to have with our kids.
We got a couple minutes before we stop for a break. So, let's talk about that piece. That's just that conversation pieces. How did you wade into that and do that, guys, I think our viewers, are just like, okay, how do I talk to my grandkids about suicide? How do I talk to my kids about suicide? How do I do that?
I think, they were wondering where I'd been because I'd spent some late nights and they asked me, and then there was several options I could have given them.
Yeah.
I could have not told them the truth, but I thought, I'm just going to say this is what I was doing, and it started the conversation and talking to them about how much I love them and how much I care about them and what that I'm somebody that they can talk to, and I'm going to be on their side, and there's opening that line. So it took a little bit of a leap of faith for me just to jump right in and say, this is where Daddy was last night, and talking to them about that. And it wasn't easy, but we did it, and we had a really productive conversation.
Good. I will say, just from my anger, when something starts happening in some of the other schools or some of that stuff, that's when we usually, we usually wade in the face first, and a lot of times I do it in church so they can't get away from me, But so I spend at least an hour with our junior high and high school students every Thursday morning, and so every once in a while you just wait for an opening there, and you just say something about some of these things have happened in our community, and I would really hope that if somebody's hurting, that you'll find somebody to talk to, or again, just the continual reminder that says, hey, we're a spot where everybody's supposed to be able to have a spot, and everybody's supposed to be able to belong. And if you are picking at somebody or not listening or doing those things, how do we make some of those differences? Before we take a break, why don't we talk a little bit real quick and just put up some of our information once, and we'll do it again in the second half, about our suicide, hotline numbers, because we do that. So why don't we talk a little bit about Ozark and those numbers, and then we'll also talk about the texting thing that you guys have got going, which I think is cool.
Sure. There's a national hotline if anyone's struggling with suicidal thoughts, and it's 1-800-273-8255, and that's a national line. And then there's a local line through the Ozark Center. There's a local number, 417-347-7720, or toll-free 1-800-247-0661, that anyone could call at any time and just talk through what's going on with them.
Good. And again, we'll have those numbers up for you. If we didn't get them up on the screen, we'll have them for you in the second half. And then I think probably after the break, we'll talk a little bit about that texting line that you've got going, where anybody can text in anything, and and just have that. So at any rate, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. This is Faith in Our Hometown, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, again, thanks for sticking with us on another Sunday morning. Obviously not the most wonderful and breezy topics for a Sunday morning, but a very important one for all of us here, talking about the issue of teen suicide. And my guests this morning are Jen Black, who's the Executive Director of the Alliance of Southwest Missouri, and Brandon Eggleston, who's the Principal at Joplin High School. We've been talking about the issue of teen suicide and what we might do to help. So right before the break, we put up a couple of numbers for the hotlines, both the national hotline and our local Ozark Center hotline. Okay, but there's also for those of you who are a little bit more, technologically into the next stage and think the telephone is a dead thing. Talk a little bit about the texting line.
The Ozark Center has started a text line. I think that's real key, reaching out to youth and teens specifically. And it's all anonymous, and they can text and they will talk to someone anonymously about what's going on with them. And they can register to 720-7TXTOZK.
But you better look at the screen for that one, because I couldn't repeat it now if my life depended on it. Okay,
Right.
So one more time, say that again, Jen.
So that it is 720-7TXTOZK.
Okay, and again, we hopefully get that on the screen for you. And when we do that, that is one of those lines that's anonymous. Anybody can ask any question they want, not just about suicide, but I mean, depression, any kind of mental health or emotional health issues. They can text any kind of a question, anything they're worried or concerned about, that maybe they just need a little bit of an opening to talk to somebody and they don't want anybody to know who they are. Because again, teenagers do care about, how's this going to look and how's this going to appear. I mean, let's face it, most of us adults care too.
Right.
Okay? So it's sometimes nice to just have an anonymous or a safe zone where everybody can kind of go and talk a little bit about the things that are bothering them. So, again, especially for our viewers, parents, grandparents, and all those kinds of things. So what are some of the things that they need to look for? What are the things we need to be concerned about in the life of a teenager? Because sometimes people don't even, they're just like, okay, we're crisscrossing paths, but what should we be concerned about? What might we look for in terms of signs that, not that necessarily a student's going to commit suicide, but that's struggling? What will we look for?
Sure. I think those are the signs of withdrawing. Teenagers, they like to be autonomous, like you're talking about, and like to spend a lot of time alone in the room, especially if they have a computer or their phone in front of the screen. I think it's important to create time that you're spending face time with them, where all electronics are put away, even if it's just an hour in the evening and a night, just to have those conversations. But withdrawing, lack of appetite, sleeping more than normal, their grades starting to fail, and that's atypical for that student. Just a lot of harsh talk about friends, just even in passing. I'm a real advocate for parents picking up their children's phones and just perusing on occasion, and I think that's very telling as well.
Sure.
And so just, watching for just absolute opposite behavior from what is normal from that teen.
And I will say this to all our viewers, I just haven't worked with teenagers and young adults for so many years now. I'm here to tell you, they will hate the fact that you're invading their lives just a little bit. They will resent it a little bit. But they also need us to do it. And they really do, in the end result, appreciate it, even though they hate it when it's happening. But that somebody's actually just checking up and seeing what they're doing. They'll see it as a bit of an invasion, but they really also, here's the deal. I think they all want to push everybody as far as they can in terms of how far they can push the boundaries, but they really want to know where the boundary is.
Right, absolutely.
And they really want to know from us that we're going to be standing there at the boundary, to catch anybody who might fall off the edge.
Kids seek structure, and they're going to live up to wherever we put our expectations, or they'll live down to our expectations. There's no doubt about that. I've seen that proven time in and time out again. But it's just extremely important to monitor those things and to and to limit the social media side of things and how that relates to a student's emotions, because that creates a whole different world for students now.
Yes, it
than
does.
what I knew. It's a completely different world of just what they're seeing and what they have access to on a regular basis. But looking at that and being nosy. I always tell parents, be nosy. There's nothing wrong with being nosy, and those things can also that can open up lines of communication.
Yeah, and I just think we've got to push some of those things. And that makes us all uncomfortable. No parent wants to, pick a fight with their kid by getting in their business, but we got to get in their business.
Right.
I mean, it's just like, when they say, well, Father Jay, why do you care about it? Because you pay me for this.
Right.
You pay me for this. You pay me to be in your face.
Yeah.
You pay me to be in your life. You pay me to do those things. And that goes for all trusted folks out there in a person's life, all school people, all church people, friends of the family. I mean, these things are really essential for all of us, that we ask some of those questions and we get into their lives, because left to their own devices, they'd leave us, they'd kind of, ice us out a little bit, and screen us out just a little bit because, well, yeah, they want their autonomy. I get it.
Right.
I do. I wanted mine too, and I still fight for some days.
Sure.
But the people who love me the most are also the ones who can get beyond that screen and who won't let me just hide and isolate and go home to my house and be by myself and all that kind of good stuff, because we got to watch those things even as adults. That we're not getting into this cycle that's helping us to to get down and stay down, rather than get out and interact with the world and make it a little bit better.
And they want, kids, they want somebody who's going to really listen to them.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be the one to solve their problems to listen.
Yeah.
But to listen and help them work through those problems, because let's face it, they're temporary problems, and kids are trying to come up with permanent solutions
To temporary problems.
to temporary problems. They're all
Yeah.
gonna, every problem is gonna work itself out.
Yeah.
And where we battle with adolescence is how impulsive kids are, and they make impulsive decisions. And there, I saw a statistic where it was something almost 50% of failed suicide attempts. So they survived the suicide attempt. They spent less than 10 minutes deliberating on whether or not to commit suicide. That's shocking, and that scares me to death.
Yeah. So this
because
is
of
not
the
something. This
impulsivity.
is not somebody sitting around depressed for months, planning their thing.
Not always,
saying,
no.
yeah. It's sometimes with kids, especially, it's very impulsive.
In many cases,
you know?
yes, but not always, and
Yeah.
so that's why looking for those warning signs is so important, and just listening to kids, and that's something we did when we tried to figure out what we're going to do at the high school. Is we wanted to hear what the kids wanted and what they needed, because they tell us and they speak to us, and they often have a better, they always have a better handle on what's best, on what's needed. I mean, what's needed and what connects with them. So having their input and giving them their voice is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and even it goes the same even for our college students. It's the same thing. It's just kind of like, and I love the fact, for years I've worked with college students more than I worked with high school students. When I came to Joplin, 12 years ago, then I inherited the younger ones again, and I got to tell you, working with the college population for 24 years again, where they finally start to develop some of that vocabulary to begin to start to tell us, in effect, how we really can help them, and how we can be a little bit more effective. Because I've long discovered with them that if you get them involved in the conversation, the more we just sit around in a little room and try to figure out how we're going to solve their problems,
Right.
Doesn't work.
Not
doesn't work. When we have the conversation with them about, okay, well, what can we do to help, or what's going to be helpful for you, we wind up with all that information. And the same is obviously true for our teenagers.
Absolutely.
Just ask them what they need. So what have they come up with for you, Brandon?
I think they mentioned it, and something that we were thinking too is they didn't want a big assembly with the speaker.
Okay, all right.
And they wanted something that within the feedback that we got within a small group setting. So that is perfect for our transitions classes. That's just kind of a small homeroom type situation. And they wanted to have those conversations within that group. They wanted something that was continually, not just a one-time event. So something that is made. It's not just they weren't looking for a big major production of something, but something little throughout the course of the school year. And they wanted something sustainable, something that would continue throughout, not just throughout this school year, but throughout the next as well, and something that we can continue to do in bits and pieces, so that line of communication about mental illness is always open.
Yeah. And I love that, frankly, because I think that it would be another reminder to our parents and grandparents and other helping, caring individuals out there, is to say none of these conversations can be one of those things that's a one-time big production.
Right.
You can't just sit them down and have the talk,
Right.
whatever it happens to be about, but you can't just sit down and have the talk once. It's kind of like the little mini talks over and over and over again. which I think is kind of important. In terms of prevention work and those kinds of things, what else might they be able to do in terms of the community of learning some other skills maybe that they need?
Yeah, currently the Safe Teens Coalition, along with many other community members that have come along specific for this topic, we're planning a town hall meeting for March
Wonderful.
26th.
Okay.
From 6
so March
to 8 p.m.
26th, March 26th, 6 to 8. And where?
It'll be at the Joplin High School Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
There'll be a live feed on the Four States homepage through the entire event, and there might be some televised time for that event as well. And we'll have a panel of professionals, parents who have lost children, people who have struggled with suicide themselves. We'll have some testimony time and then some question and answers. People will be able to submit questions the entire time, and then they'll be responded to during
Wonderful.
those 2 hours.
So give the dates one more time.
Yep, March 26th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Joplin High School Performing Arts Center.
Okay, so unlike, we didn't ask anybody, obviously, but the kids said they didn't want an event like that. Sometimes the adults do. So
Correct.
again, we're trying to reach all audiences to do whatever we can to do what we can in order to get the word out. So within that context, we certainly want to make sure that all of you know that you're invited to that. Okay, you don't have to have a teenager, you don't have to do those things. At any rate, we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Don't go away. Stick with us. And again, our thanks to you two this morning for helping us break this topic open just a little bit. We'll be right back.
The SANE program, or Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program, is a program established to provide a coordinated, specialized care to patients or women or men who've been the victim of sexual assault.
The SANE program is really designed to be a collaborative community response to sexual assault.
It's really important to make sure that it's not just the report or the forensic, but they get all of the testing that might be needed for their health.
It's also important to know that you don't need to know if you want to press charges or not. We don't get law enforcement involved unless you request it.
I just want to express to the victim that it is never your fault. You always have the right to say no, and that it's your body. So if you say yes one time, it doesn't mean every time.
I think it's important that sexual assault victims remember they've been victims of a crime, and crime victims do not pay for those services.
Again, we're so happy you've joined us this morning for another Sunday morning on Faith in Our Hometown. Again, our discussion this morning is not necessarily the pleasant thing that you might want for every Sunday morning, but our show here, I hope, is going to help us to raise awareness and to help us figure out how to talk to each other, and especially to our young people. They live in a world that's fast and furious, and they really need adult mentors in their lives with whom they can talk about some of the issues that are scary for them. And one of those is how to cope and grow up and to figure out how to continue to deal with life and all the pressures that are there. Sometimes we older kids don't get it right either, but at least we've had a little bit more practice in terms of fielding all the different things that come to us. So again, my guest this morning, Jen Black from the Alliance of Southwest Missouri, Brandon Eggleston, who's the principal at Joplin High School. Thanks for helping us to introduce. Next, we're going to be back to talk about teen suicide just a little bit more. So join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown. Blessings.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.